So the living room in our house is, well, the center of our house. It's my office, it's our game room, it's our dining room, it's our guest room. It's basically just everything. And our old shelves were the IKEA BESTÅ shelves, and they worked pretty well, but they were heavy and they were bulky and they stuck out a little weird into the space. We also have no closets in this house, and so we got a BESTÅ cabinet, and we were using that with the door as our like broom closet, vacuum closet. And it worked pretty well with the shelves, but it also stuck out into the room a bit much, and we didn't really like it, and that meant the dog beds were out in the room. It dominated the space, and also there weren't enough shelves for the games we had anyway, so we needed a solution. First things first is we got rid of the shelves. So we pulled all the games off of the shelves and we wiped down the shelves and we sold the shelves. So I listed them on Craigslist and they sold after about a day. And as soon as I knew they were sold, we cleared all of the games off and we had to store the games someplace. So they ended up taking up a lot of the floor space over in the dining room section of the living room. Really tells you how many games you have when you have to put them someplace else that's not on the shelf. So, yeah. But our shelves sold for a pretty good cost, and we were able to get a decent deal for them, which made me happy. And yeah, then we just had to live with this situation in the living room until we could finish building the solution that we were going for with the new shelves. And yeah, we had 16 stacks of games all on those shelves. So there's that. The next day, the people buying the shelves came and took the shelves, and it was great. But then we had this big empty space in our house. So we went to Home Depot, like you do. We knew that we wanted to do wall-mounted because we lived in this house long enough. We now know that wall-mounted is what we want. And we wanted them to be wood boards shelves that we made ourselves because otherwise they're just way too expensive. For example, these real wood boards are $11.25 a foot. So that wasn't going to work. So we went and got some plywood, which is a 4-foot by 8-foot section. We got 2 of these. And we just cut them down to just under 12 inches each using a friend's table saw one day out in the back. The reason I say just under 12 inches is because the width of the blade is 1/8 of an inch. So if you cut 12 inches, 12 inches, 12 inches, your last shelf will actually end up being 3/8 of an inch less wide. So you just have to kind of distribute accordingly. After we ripped all the boards down to size, we used my friend's router to round the edges of the boards. So we did the tops and the bottom on just the one edge that was going to be our front edge, so that sliding the games in and off of the shelf will be a little easier and less detrimental to the game boxes. Afterwards, we took everything home in our friend's truck that we borrowed, and we just laid the rails up on the wall kind of where we wanted. These rails need to be 24 inches apart on center, maximum, and so I kind of just leaned them up on the wall kind of where I thought they would go so I could figure out spacing and how I like them and figure out just where we would be putting all of these rails. We didn't want floor to ceiling for the entire wall. We wanted to have some floor space back, which is one of the reasons why we got rid of the big shelves. So, yeah. So this is me just measuring 24 inches out so I can properly eyeball and figure out what's going on with these shelves. Because we wanted to reduce the number of holes that we'd be putting in our walls, we went ahead and got the system that has this hang track. So you just have to put the hang track up and then you can hang all of the rails off of this hang track. Our walls are awful to drill into. That wall in particular, the dogs are they're helping a lot. They're helping a lot in this chaos. But our walls are plaster lath walls with drywall on top of them. And so to put anything into them, we have to use what are called toggle bolts. And we have to drill 1/2-inch holes at a minimum into our walls wherever we want to put a hole. So you can see the toggle bolts are hanging. There's an anchor on the other side. This is the hang rail that we'll put them on. once we installed the handrail, which took a lot of effort, I sketched out what I had been picturing design-wise for our shelves. So you can see I kind of wanted to do this like wave sort of thing with different size rails so that we can accommodate like a chair and the dog bed and also our lamp. And so we don't have floor to ceiling shelves. Once we put the rails up according to my sketch and kind of eyeballed it with our shelves, and Steve went ahead and did all of the math on the lengths of the shelves that we would need. The next morning, I took the whiteboard out that Steve had done, and I cut all of the shelves to the length that they would need to be using my speed square and circular saw, made sure to set the depth of the circular saw just so it would cut through the shelves. Steve would hand sand all of my edges that I cut to make sure they were nice and smooth and finished, which is great. He also cleaned up our routed edge a little bit. Then we went ahead and pre-stained all of these boards because plywood has a fake veneer on top of the wood, and so it absorbs weirdly and differently sometimes, so they recommend that you pre-stain it if you're going to stain it, which we did. So we stained them with this driftwood color, which you can see here, I really like. We did another shelf previously with the driftwood. I really like it. It just brings out the tones of the wood, even flake wood like the plywood vinyl. Then we did a coat of Minwax Polyclear very late at night for the first coat because the drying of the stain just takes so long. And this is the process that actually took the longest, was just staining and sealing everything. So I sealed both sides of the boards. This stuff is really bad. You want to make sure you wear gloves. It's just super sticky, and do it outdoors in a well-ventilated area. The next morning, I went back with my hand sander and I sanded every board, every side. And I did this with 220 grit sandpaper because I wanted a nice smooth finish. You want to sand it very smooth. And then after it's all smooth and gorgeous, you do another coat of Polyclear. While my second coat of Polyclear was drying, I went back inside and started attaching the rails to the walls. So I used this little magnetic level to make sure that the rail was straight up and down, and then I went ahead and secured the rail to the wall, first by drilling a little pilot hole through the rail, then moving the rail and putting in the pre-drilling the main hole, and then I went and drove 3-inch screws through the rail. And I managed to make it where we had every other rail on a stud because our studs are 16 inches on center, which means that every other stud will line up with one of the rails because that's how math works. So I just did these 3-inch screws into the stud on all of the ones that worked into the stud, and they hold super well. These shelves, I'm not worried about them at all holding our collection, as I believe it's rated that it can hold 1,000 pounds. Actually, no, over 1,000. After the polyurethane was dry on the shelves, I started bringing all the shelves in. And they still, let's be honest, I couldn't wait. They still smelled a little bit, but I just wanted to get them in and have them in the house and not in the yard so I can start admiring and picturing where I was going to put games. So yeah, they looked really good with the white and the driftwood color and the back wall, the paint color of the back wall. So yeah, I'm really happy with how these turned out and how they looked. And they were very simple to make, and they're very cost efficient as well. Some of the shelves lined up in such a way that they would line up on one of the braces, and so we made sure the cuts were such that they would line up evenly. We did end up having a gap in the center, but we like it for our tall games, so that works. Then I screwed in the shelves using these screws that I don't like how they stick out, but they'll hold the shelves in place so they won't come off. After all of that, I just wiped them down with a dust rag and some duster to get all the sawdust off that might have been off on my second sanding. The next day, the shelf was dry. The polyurethane had been cured long enough I could start putting games on it, which is, of course, probably the hardest part of this entire process, is figuring out how we wanted to organize the games. So we had piles all over the house, including the mega pile, and I just started putting stuff up kind of in loose groups of theme. So I put all of Steve's war games together, and then I had like his epic space games in one spot, and then I put are like older titles from the 70s or 80s up on top because they have weird box sizes. And then I just kind of went ahead and played with it. I ended up rearranging a number of times, and the shelves are not currently what they were at the end of this video clip. I've constantly rearranged it, and I do want to get rid of more games so that we can rearrange it because we're not able to fit all of the games on our new shelf solution, partially because we just keep acquiring new games. So that's our problem. But the very, very top of the shelf, we need a ladder to get to, and so I ended up putting games up there that we don't access a lot, or big box games that we know we like, but we just don't play them frequently. So Eclipse, for example, Lords of Waterdeep, our Millennial Blades copy, things like that. You can see I'm shifting stuff over to make room. The second shelf from the top was kind of like our classic games that we really like and we don't see them leaving our collection anytime soon, games that we're sort of always down to play. The next shelf is similar, in addition with Steve's War Games, and then our like TMG game collection. And then, yeah. In the end, the shelves ended up costing us $238.71 for the hardware, the wood, the stain, the sealant, and the foam brushes that we used. I'm not including the sandpaper and the saw and all that jazz because we just had that. So they actually ended up being cheaper than the shelves, the 4 BESTÅ units that we had the games on before. And while they did take time, most of the time was just spent on waiting for sealant to dry. That's our games. All in all, we are super happy with these shelves, and they open up the room a lot. They give us more floor space. The dog bed can now go under the shelves. We're just really happy. And we've actually talked about putting these style of shelves elsewhere in the house now because we know that we can make them and they're pretty cost effective and they hold a lot of weight. So if you are in a situation where you can permanently drill into the walls and you're going to be there for a while, this could be a good cheap alternative, especially if you're a little bit handy and comfortable making your own shelves. I hope this video was helpful for anybody looking into making their own custom shelves. While I do love the IKEA BESTÅ shelves more than the clocks that seem to be really popular, they just were too heavy and a little big for the space that we had, and we are fortunate enough to own our house so we can do these sort of permanent modifications. If you're using this video as a tutorial or guide for what you might want to do with your shelves, I have some more specific information down in the doobly-doo that you might find helpful. Otherwise, stay tuned for the next video, which will be about our new table.